So the headline story that I've identified today is a $50 billion drone deal between the United States and Ukraine. It's profoundly positive. I know some people might say, well, wait a minute, why are they selling drones to the U.S. and then getting things? Well, shouldn't it just be given? I understand. But in the context in which we are, in what we have to work with, in who we're dealing with Trump and the way that Trump operates, this is actually profoundly positive. Ukraine is on the verge of sealing a $50 billion drone mega deal with the U.S. We're woefully behind in drone tech. Ukraine's on the bleeding edge of this. On 25 August in Kyiv, Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal met with U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg to advance preparations for the landmark agreement. Here it is, a little bit about it in the Euromaidan press. Ukraine proposed a joint drone production with the U.S. worth $50 billion over 5 years, according to President Zelensky. The deal envisions producing 10 million drones annually. What? 10 million? Now, it's not going to like the front lines necessarily. I mean, some of these may be going there, but no, they're creating drones because they know how to create drones. And then they're going to ship a lot of these drones to the U.S. And in exchange, they're going to get military hardware and weaponry that they cannot otherwise get. So it's kind of a win-win situation. We're behind. We know we're behind. Somebody in the Pentagon has realized this, and this looks like a good deal, making it one of the largest defense initiatives worldwide. The deal includes not only bulk procurement of Ukrainian drones, but also the development of joint technologies to strengthen Ukraine's defense capabilities. Ukraine will sell its domestically developed drones and, in return, receive advanced U.S. weapons. Okay, so this is what it's all about, and this is a very, very positive development. So you could get cut off from other things, like maybe I have an attitude because I don't like what you said, but if I made a deal and you're getting some and you're benefiting, you're less likely to cut off arbitrarily your opponent or the person that was your ally that you now consider an opponent. They also discussed creating reliable security guarantees to prevent future aggression against Ukraine, developed in close cooperation with international partners. So I think this is a really encouraging development. It's not sealed, but they're working on this, and it's just been being announced that they're almost there. That's good. Now, everything else was just weird today. And don't tune out because you need to have the context and understand what's going on here. Okay, so the EU is readying its 19th sanctions package against Russia. Options are running thin. Focus shifts to the shadow fleet and to loopholes. Real pressure may come from Washington as Trump threatens massive sanctions on tariffs. But will he actually do that? We have no idea. But the EU's working on this. Meanwhile, Trump is saying that Europe will give Ukraine major security guarantees and then we'll back them up. Like, we're not going to take the lead, but we'll back their play. If we get a deal, and I think we will, I don't see big problems. We'll support it because we want the killing to stop. Of course, that's the same line that he keeps trotting out. Now, when you're dealing with Trump, you have to deal with something different than what you've dealt with Biden or Bush or whoever else before him. And I mean, the example here is today is the 4th anniversary of an attack on Abbey Gate in Afghanistan. It was an airport. There was a tea explosion. A tea explosion, and it was a bad thing. Now, these are I believe, the family members of those servicemen who were killed at this time. And it really gave the United States a black eye. This was part of pulling out, and the pulling out was perhaps premature. Trump created a deal with the Taliban, and then Joe Biden was very interested in pulling out before the 20th anniversary deadline of the beginning of the war in Afghanistan. And so it was just bad. Like, trying to do it for this date was not a great idea. Okay, so this is 4th anniversary of the attack at Abbey Gate. He put this executive order or proclamation out, and I'm troubled by it because I want the family to have their loved ones recognized, but I don't want him to use this as an attack on Joe Biden, which is what it amounted to. On one of the darkest days in our nation's history 4 years ago, the gates of hell sprung open when an evil jihadi T carried out a suicide bombing in Kabul, Afghanistan, killing 13 of our United States armed forces. And he goes on at exactly 5:36 on August 26, 2021, a barbaric ISIS-K, one of the prisoners set free by the Taliban less than 2 months earlier, detonated a suicide bomb at a civilian gate in the international airport in Kabul. In what will be remembered as one of the most shameful and heartbreaking moments in our nation's collective memory, Joe Biden checked his watch and time stood still. Look, there's no need to do that. Like honor the memory of these people, but you don't need to make it a talking point about Joe Biden, but he just needs to make it a talking point about Joe Biden. Now I, therefore, Donald Trump, President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim August 26, 2025 as a day in commemoration of the 4th anniversary of the attack on Abbey Gate. I'm glad that the family members are having their loved ones memorialized. I am not glad about the spirit of this proclamation. Michael McFaul put something out as well. He's a Republican congressman from Texas. And he also mentioned the Biden administration. And again, the Republicans will say, see, look what the Biden administration did. But 4 years ago today, during the Biden administration's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and it was a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, 13 brave U.S. service members were killed. So the mention of the Biden administration, one and done, and then he's on. 13 brave U.S. service members were killed by a T at Abbey Gate. We must never forget these young Americans, heroes who gave everything in service of our nation. And then he simply lists them. This was a much better tone, although you didn't have to poke Biden in the eye, but okay. So again, you want the families to have some kind of closure. And now think back. This was August of 2021. The evacuation happens before September 11th, and then they're going to remember the people falling off of the cargo planes and that sort of thing as they're trying to evacuate. And it was just a really bad look. That's only about 6 months before Putin starts to invade Ukraine. And perhaps if it wasn't for this event or the way that this played out, perhaps Putin might not have been so antsy. This is the way that at least a lot of Republicans see this. And I'm not sure that it's necessarily fair, but it certainly wasn't helping things that it played out like this. And then Putin invaded in February. At least 169 Afghans, 13 U.S. troops were killed in this blast at the Kabul airport. This was, again, on that day in 2021. Okay, now next story. South Korea was they were kind of nervous when they were coming to meet Trump because they didn't want to become Zelensky'd. It's weird when you turn something into a verb, but that's the Zelensky moment. The South Korean president avoided it. So here it is in the Kyiv Post and what happened and how they were thinking and processing, because they were worried that they could have something happen to them like what happened to Zelensky. It's really terrible that they have to work around Trump in this way. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung concluded his first White House meeting with a U.S. President Donald Trump, navigating what a staff feared would be a diplomatic minefield, a high-stakes affair aimed at shoring up the U.S.-Korea alliance, defined by a remarkable shift in tone, a pointed Zelensky moment, and a revealing nod to the art of the deal. Trump took to social media hours before the summit to post a vaguely threatening message about a supposed purge or revolution in South Korea. This move, a familiar gambit for the U.S. president, set off alarm bells among Lee's staff. What did he post? He posted this. So this was just before he was going to meet with the president from South Korea. What is going on in South Korea? It seems like a purge or a revolution. We can't have that and do business there. I'm seeing the new president today at the White House. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Well, that's not going to really calm people just before the meeting. Okay, so it's a high stakes affair and a revealing nod toward the art of the deal. Trump took to social media and posted this, and it got the president from South Korea a little worried, right? Worried about a repeat of the fraught meeting between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. So what happened? The feared confrontation never materialized. Instead, President Lee, in a masterclass of what some observers called a gratitude diplomacy. Now, they're sucking up to Trump, and Trump likes to be sucked up to, and that's just the way that this is working out. It's alarming, and they're manipulating him, and he seems to just be okay with them doing that. And It's kind of an ugly look. Disarmed the situation with flattery, a shared strategic vision. He lauded Trump's past peacemaking efforts on the Korean Peninsula. That's fair. He did try to bring peacemaking efforts to the Korean Peninsula, and he even suggested the possibility of a Trump world complex being built in North Korea, a clear and public appeal to the American president's business interests. He had prepared for the meeting by reading Trump, The Art of the Deal. So if you're not familiar with the book, if you understand the book, you understand a little bit more about what Trump tries to do. He viewed Trump's public criticisms and unpredictable style not as genuine hostility, but as a negotiating tactic, a core principle of the famous memoir. So Trump does that. He's just, oh yeah, you're the this, you're the that, and then he works back down from this higher end. Now he does that in weird places. He doesn't seem to do that at all with Putin, but he does this with allies for some odd reason I can't quite understand. Lee was able to steer the conversation toward constructive dialogue. The result was an unexpectedly warm and productive summit. The two leaders agreed to modernize their alliance, that's between the U.S. and South Korea, strengthen the trilateral cooperation with Japan in the face of North Korean threats, and President Lee also pledged to increase South Korea's defense spending, something that Trump wants to see, a key demand from the Trump administration. He not only avoided a Zelensky moment his team had dreaded, but turned a potentially hostile encounter into a platform for reinforcing the alliance. Okay, a little bit more about this. Again, here's what's going on with South Korea, but they worked around it. And then here he's talking through an interpreter about, I look forward to this Trump Tower. Listen to this.
The only remaining divided nation in the world is the Korean Peninsula. And I would like to ask for your role in establishing peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I look forward to your meeting with Chairman Kim Jong-un and construction of a Trump Tower in North Korea and playing golf at that place.
So I want you to be the great peacemaker that you aspire to be, and we look forward to your intervention in North and South Korea. Okay, so they're playing him. I mean, that's what this amounts to. They're playing to his ego, and he understands the art of the deal. Now, I've read The Art of the Deal, and it's a poorly written book, but it wasn't written by Trump. It was written by his ghostwriter, Tony Schwartz. And there were some interesting things, like the Woolman Ring chapter was really interesting. And when he tried to hostile takeover of Holiday Inn, but didn't actually get it, but he sold the Holiday Inn shares at a premium. I mean, he's bragging about that. So it's an interesting thing to kind of get into his psyche, but they're playing him, and he just enjoys the flattery. Now, he enjoys the flattery here, but then he doesn't actually turn up the pressure, like he's turning the pressure up on South Korea before the meeting with the South Korean president. But he doesn't seem to be willing to do that with Putin, and that's what's really interesting. Okay, next story. Reuters reports that during recent U.S.-Russia talks on peace in Ukraine, Washington, that is Trump, floated the possible energy incentives for Moscow. Huh? What? So in Alaska, you're not talking about, look, Vladimir, if you do this, I'm going to have to do that. And you don't want to make me have to do this to you, right? No. Hey, how about possible energy incentives for Moscow? Proposals included ExxonMobil's return, U.S. equipment for Russia's Arctic LNG-2, and even the purchase of Russia's nuclear icebreakers. Like, they're trying to make deals rather than actually work out a way to bring Putin to the table. So why is it that the art of the deal seems to work on others, but he doesn't apply those principles to what's going on with Russia? I don't understand it. Okay. Meanwhile, we see some other stories here. Orban. Blackmail and explosions won't help. Orban threatens Zelensky over the Druzhba pipeline. Now, there's been some back and forth. The Ukrainians hit the Druzhba pipeline. Zelensky said, yeah, we're going to hit it. I mean, it's part of what's going on with the war with Russia. And the Hungarians were upset about this. This is hurting their energy security, yeah, like 3.5 years to get off of Russian oil and gas, but they haven't been willing to do it. So the prime minister stated that the Ukrainian president openly threatened his country with strikes on the pipeline through which Hungary receives oil. Zelensky admitted that they are hitting the Druzhba which means friendship pipeline, because we do not support Ukraine's accession to the EU. This once again proves that Hungarians made the right decision. You made the right decision by staying on that pipeline because they're going to do that, or because what? I'm trying to piece this together, and it doesn't. Zelensky admitted that they're hitting the Druzhba because we do not support Ukraine's accession, but the Druzhba affects all these other countries, and only Orban is upset about it. Like the other countries, Poland and the Baltic states, they're all cool with it, right? But Orban's upset with it. Had the Nord Stream pipelines, I talked about this morning, Anton Gerashenko posted this, had the Nord Stream pipelines remained operating, this is how much money Russia would have earned to wage war with them, $16 billion per year. Now, I'm guessing that that's gross, not net. That means that's the top line before you take out expenses, but it's still going to be a bundle of money. And yeah, it's just, so the guy that and then he gave this example. So 16 billion means this many missiles and drones and military equipment and things along those lines. So the guy that is going to jail for 15 years, it looks like, or he could be going to jail for 15 years for the sabotage of Nord Stream. He did Ukraine a tremendous service in stopping the flow of money to Russia. And that 15 years will be, the number of people that will be alive because of that action. I know this is a weird way of processing it, but because Russia has been deprived of 16 billion a year for the last 3 years, it's hard to calculate. Okay, meanwhile, in India, India's richest man made 724 million from Russian oil because he's buying that Russian oil hand over fist, and then they're refining it and shipping it elsewhere. So he's profiting off of this, and shame on him. It's causing more death. Okay, tensions erupted between, this is a weird story. Tensions erupted between Moscow and its key ally Iran, which heavily supported Russia's war. So during the 2025 Iran-Israel war, Moscow reportedly leaked information on Iran's air defenses to Israel. Now, they say that politics make strange bedfellows, but you would think that Moscow and Iran would be more allied, but Moscow helped Israel attack Iran's air defenses, and I don't understand exactly why, except that authoritarians all kind of work together, but they don't trust each other. It's a really weird thing to watch. Okay, talked about this the other day where Lavrov is being interviewed by a journalist who really took him to task. And he said, Kristen, have you read the Budapest Memorandum? Yes. It seems you didn't because you can't understand what I'm saying. So he's going to go on and he's going to argue that the Budapest Memorandum doesn't actually require Russia to protect Ukraine, but only this. This is coming from Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Yevhen Pribyanis. Lavrov says in an interview that the Budapest Memorandum, Russia did not promise to use force against Ukraine, but only to use not to use nuclear weapons against her. Does he take people for fools, or does he think that they can't read? I think he takes them for fools. Here it is. Like you can look at this with your own eyes, just like I am. The Russian Federation, and I've read the whole document myself, so I was like, no, that's not what it says. The Russian Federation, there's a commitment to Ukraine to respect the independence and sovereignty of the existing borders of Ukraine. This is part of the Budapest Memorandum, and that means that Russia's going to do it, and the U.S. and the British are going to do this. The Russian Federation, there's an obligation to refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or the political independence of Ukraine, and that none of their weapons will ever be used against Ukraine. Well, they broke that. So if they're going to break this, why should we believe whatever else they're going to say? Oh, no. We're going to make a deal. We're going to do X, Y, or Z, or we're not going to attack you again, or whatever. Russian Federation, there's a commitment to Ukraine to refrain from economic coercion designed to subordinate to their own interests the exercise by Ukraine of the rights inherent in the sovereignty and thus secure the advantages of any kind. So what they were trying to do was politically subordinate Ukraine back in before the Maidan revolution. And then what they did in 2022 was actually use real, actual military force. Either way, it's violating Ukraine. I also saw this. This is a map of the USSR nationalities from a Soviet textbook in 1941. Clearly shows that Ukrainians in orange, if you look at the orange here, Ukrainians in orange were the majority, not only in Ukraine, but also in parts of Russia. This spills way beyond the borders of Ukraine. So there's plenty of ethnic Ukrainians here as well. Even Soviet textbooks refute Lavrov's lie that occupation was meant to protect the Russian majority. But the way that they play this or make it, it's kind of a scam. The way that they do this is that they say, well, we're protecting Russian speakers. Now, they may be ethnic Russians or they may be Ukrainians who speak Russian, but they're really Russians because they speak Russian. Well, it doesn't matter if you speak a foreign language. That doesn't change your ethnicity. And then finally, last article, I talked about this earlier, but Russia will withdraw from the European Convention for the Prevention of Tea. And you can see what I mean here if you're looking at this, what they do to prisoners. The decree has already been signed by the prime minister. And yeah, that's where we are. Russia's telling you what it's going to do by their actions. All right. Tell me what you think about this thing with the art of the deal. Help me understand why Trump uses the art of the deal to kind of put pressure on folks like the president of South Korea, but he's just not willing to do it to Putin. It's really bizarre to watch his behavior when you consider that, like, if he was doing this to Putin, you could see it, but he just refuses to do it. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.